Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Road to Recovery podcast. This podcast is a platform for education, discussion, and conversations on mental health. I'm your host, Amira Shah, and in this podcast, you'll get to know more about the therapeutic process, insight into life from the perspective of the psyche, and also join me in exploring current issues with other practitioners. I specialize in grief, but I'm always interested in learning about the human experience of the mind, heart, and spirit. So join me on this journey of in-depth learning about ourselves and the world we live in. Hello everyone, and welcome back to Science of the Soul. Today I have with me Chaplain Coordinator Tom Schmidt. Tom works at a university in the Student Wellbeing and Counseling Unit. He studied theology. He's a dad, a husband, and a lovely person. We used to work together. Hello, Tom. Thank you for joining me today.
Good afternoon. It's great to be here.
So several months ago, we talked about recording a podcast because whenever we had conversations, I find it really difficult to leave your office because we just keep going. And you also taught me how to meditate in a specific way through Lectio Divina, which I've been practicing to date.
Great.
My last one was yesterday, actually.
It's serving you well?
Yeah, I really enjoy it. And now I have some really good texts that I refer to. One is called The Enlightened Heart, which is poetry.
Yeah.
And the other one is called The Enlightened Mind, which is prose. And you've got scripture from the Upanishads, from Muhammad, from Buddha, from Lao Tzu, from all the Psalms pretty much. It's so expansive and it's just so beautiful. So as part of the practice that you've taught me is I would read the poetry from the Enlightened Heart, and I'll go through the steps that you had taught me, what resonates with me, what is God speaking to me, what is landing, and repeat that. And then I will open a corresponding part in the Enlightened Mind, which is prose, which I don't read out loud, only the poetry part I read out loud. And then I try to let the two texts speak to each other. And then I try and gain some insight from it. And then I think about how I can implement that. What does that look like in my life in a practical way? So I've been doing that more or less once a week. I mean, I've had breaks here and there, but thank you very much. I really, really wanted to say thank you for that. You've given me a gift.
Beautiful. That's great. It's a simple practice, but it's really effective if we take the time and go slow. I remember when we sat down and did it together, there's always a temptation to rush through it, and we want to move on to the next step. And the key to it's actually about being still and being slow, so that there's time for God to speak to our hearts and to reveal things in our minds. If we rush on, then we never have time to actually really listen and hear what God might have to say to us.
And based on that practice as well, what I've started to do is I've got a little notebook called the Book of Shadows.
Ooh, all right.
And I write in little maxims, like really condensed versions of my Lectio Divina practice, and I write it in this Book of Shadows. So it's my coffee table book. So when I'm sitting around, at the end of the day, just putting my feet up, I'll pick up that book and just read some of the quotes or the maxims I've written in there that were products of the practice, just as a reminder.
So it's like a condensed journal.
Yeah, it's just basically one line.
And that's the point of Lectio Divina, right? It's about taking maybe a broad thought and listening to it until God reveals the heart of it. And then maybe it's like it's almost like an onion, really. Like you peel away the layers until you get to the very core of what is the intersection of my heart and God's heart and what's going on there. And so to have that journal of really short sayings is actually a way of practicing that and recording that. So that's exciting. Oh, gee, that'd be an insightful little text, wouldn't it? That you're creating there.
If someone picks it up, they'll be like, "What is this?" And obviously, it's also in my own language. The first maxim, if I remember correctly, was something around, if you're feeling like shit, there's probably shit landing on people around you as well. Something like that. It was much shorter, way more condensed, and but it just came from a time where I just realized, I'm like, I'm really struggling. I'm really feeling like crap right now. It's so uncomfortable and I'm so upset. And then I just took a moment and thought, after Lectio Divina practice, and I thought, there's no way that I'm the only one feeling this way. If I'm feeling like this, people around me and close to me is likely to feel just as bad as I do. So it kind of decenters me.
Yep.
So whenever I feel particularly crappy at the moment, for example, I'll just look around and be like, okay, who else is feeling terrible as a consequence of this incident that would have happened? Like, just kind of decenter myself from obsessing and ruminating that this is, I'm the one that's suffering, the shit has landed on other people as well.
Yeah. So exercise in perspective.
Yeah. Thank you. That's what I should write in my book. But that was my journey and my process.
Yeah.
I guess for listeners, now that we've just suddenly jumped into Lectio Divina, can you tell us just briefly what that is and what that looks like?
Well, first of all, I'm by no means an expert on this, just maybe a fellow practitioner. So Lectio Divina, there's two words there, Lectio, which means, reading, and Divina is divine. So it means divine reading. So it's a process we bring to our holy text, where we believe that God speaks. And it's a way of reading in a way to hear God speak to us clearly. So it's not a very complex practice, and it's one of those hard things where there's a technique, but it's not about the technique. It's about the posture of our heart, and so that maybe the technique goes hand in hand with, it's actually about having a heart that is willing to be still and somewhat quiet, and take some time, and so it involves taking just a simple bit of scripture, sort of our holy text, and in my tradition we often talk about sitting with it like a diamond. You pick up a diamond and you turn it, and it's got lots of different faces. And the light goes through a diamond in 1,000 different ways. And you can study a diamond for a long time and see the different angles and the different colours and the way it draws in light and sends out light. And so you can spend time studying and understanding and just appreciating and seeing things through that diamond, if that makes sense. So it's this idea of picking up a text and just turning it like a diamond and seeing what we see. And not just intellectually, but also in this process, it's understanding that, well, God actually, when we read our text, we believe that God speaks to us. So God is speaking to my heart. And so as I'm turning the diamond of a text, I'm also maybe turning the diamond of my heart and helping those two maybe synergize and come together so that my heart can hear what God has to say. And even when and then taking the time once I've heard is to listen more. So not just go, I've heard something great, God's spoken to me, here we go. But just go, okay, that's good. What does that mean? Or if I sit with that longer, what more clarity is there to come? So when we did this, we talked about, you might have said, oh, maybe God's saying this, and you talk for a few sentences, and we say, well, actually, we want to bring that down to one sentence or one phrase. Or if you were to sum that up in one word, what is God saying to you today? And so when we can distill that into one word, often that brings more truth to us than a well-explained answer. Because again, it's a conversation with our hearts, not just our minds. So That's the process of, well, how I understand anyway. The process of Lectio Divina is taking the infinite, how God speaks, which is infinitely possible, and sitting with that long enough for it to be distilled down into one word, which is a very precise and clear and often profound thing. It doesn't always have to be a word, one word. It could be a phrase.
Yeah.
But like you said, your journal is full of lots of really short, phrases or sayings. So that's, we're listening to clarify. And if you spent more time, you could take that phrase and go, well, what's the one word that, if God wanted to say one thing to me from this, what would the one truth be? So that's how I understand it and practice it.
And because of the process of opening up to the content and then condensing and taking, it takes me almost an hour to do this, to write, to sit, to contemplate, to read again and again. That process, it's an experience, and therefore when you see those few words, you're taken back. You know exactly what that's about. Yeah. Kind of like, it's more just like a marker, like a reminder. Yeah. Because you've done that, you've put in the time, you've experienced that. Yep.
Yeah, and suddenly it changes the meaning of words for you. And you carry that with you. Often, if you've spent that much time, you're going to carry that with you, through the day. I don't know what time of the day you practice that, but often if it's something we can make time for in the morning, then it's a word that actually shapes our day. I remember when I first started practicing this, every now and then when something really profound came to me, I'd write it on my hand or on my arm in a black marker. Oh, really? And just have that, and so that word was it was on my arms all day. And so whenever I was doing anything, I could see that word, and it kind of was just this beautiful kind of meditation for the day. Yeah. And if I couldn't scrub it off, maybe for a few days.
That's cool. I like that. Because, literally yesterday when I was doing this practice, I was just thinking about, because I do it in the mornings because I find it more beneficial. However, I have tried to do it at night, and this is interesting. It gets carried through the night and in the mornings. So I didn't expect that. So I felt particularly calm, and just the practice was still in my mind. So I was like, oh, maybe it's not too bad to do it at night. But generally I do it in the mornings. And I was literally just thinking, too bad I don't do tattoos. I'm like, too bad I don't have tattoos. I can't just like scribble on my skin I can remember, these words or these maxims.
There's always Sharpies.
Yeah.
Or henna. You get a henna, the henna ink.
Yeah. That's a good idea.
Lasts for a bit, but yeah. Well, they say the last thing you think about at night is the first thing you think about in the morning.
That's probably it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for telling us what it's about. But I guess today I wanted to talk a little bit about how you see the role of spirituality in mental health and well-being, seeing that you're situated in the Wellbeing unit in the university, and you clearly have some background in, managing people in distress, in crisis, and also fostering faith and helping people, guiding them towards finding some sort of like peace and resolution in their lives, even though it can be chaotic at the given time. How do you see this role of spirituality?
So I'm not a mental health professional. I'm not trained in that. My training's in faith and spirituality, but I think one of our main goals as spiritual people is our goal is towards wholeness, right? We're always orientated towards wholeness. So there's always an orientation in all the work I've done towards how can we be mentally whole and physically and spiritually and in every way possible, right? So so there's always been that focus in the work I've done with young people over the years of how can we help, how does faith help support and encourage our mental well-being, or mental wholeness. It's funny, in the university we talk about wellness lots, and I think that's fantastic. I've got a little note on my wall that says instead of wellness, wholeness. Because for me, that's the spiritual, I suppose that's the spiritual reflection of that, or the spiritual turn.
Yeah.
Wellness is great, but really wellness comes when we're whole. And the goal of most faiths is to be whole, right? Is to seek and pursue wholeness. And so that's part of that process, is that when we can be whole, which is fully integrated. I often talk about my work is helping people become themselves, which is really a nod to how can I help you be everything that you've been created to be in all the wholeness that is possible for you to experience in this life. And none of us fully get there. But that's our journey. That's what we're focusing on. So
that reminds me of Lao Tzu again, probably because I've just been doing a lot of reflections on those scriptures on harmony. When everything in your life is in harmony and all your emotions are in harmony, you feel whole. And Buddha also said that there's a Buddha in every one of us. We just have to allow that to come out. So it speaks to authenticity and also potential. Like you can be as authentic as you want to be, but once you're liberated to be your whole full self and everything else is in harmony, then you can flourish as a human. I feel.
Yeah. So the Buddha said there's a Buddha inside all of us, and the Christians would say, well, the Holy Spirit lives in all of us. So there's a presence of the divine that's inside of us that we explore surrendering to or becoming to understand or accept or trust. And Jews talk about this idea of shalom, which I'm not a Jewish scholar at all. There's no real helpful English translation for it. It means so much. It means this kind of sense of wholeness, the alignment of not just myself, but myself with, not just in myself, that sense of wholeness, but also myself with others and myself with creation and myself with my neighborhood and my family. Like there's a sense of shalom is this peace, this wholeness, everything in alignment, the way it should be, right? So there's, I think, every faith has that pursuit of wholeness and an understanding that there's something divine within us. That part of our journey in faith is to coming to understand that and to trust that and to live in alignment with that.
Does it ever happen? Is it something like you have glimpses and moments and short periods of that, but the rest of the time you're just flailing like me? Just flail.
I love the phrase that comes to mind. I'm not a person that can quote, this author said this, but anyway, I'll quote lots of things, and they're all ideas that are someone else's. None of these are my ideas. We call it the now and not yet. We live in the now and not yet, which is this idea of, and that's a Christian idea that perfection is something we have now, but also not yet. So it's a paradox, right? So lots of different faiths live in this paradox. Present these paradoxes that yes, we have wholeness, but we also don't yet have wholeness. So it's ours, but it's also we don't experience it fully. So is it possible? Yes and no. As in, yes, it is ours, and it's there, but our lived experience also tells us that we're not there yet. And so whether that's heaven or nirvana or whatever those ideas of arriving there, is that just a future thing that we kind of never get to, but we'll maybe get to once we die or once we reach that, or is there a sense of, does that break through into now sometimes? I think for me, heaven is not a thing that it's just the place I go when I die. It's a reality that I want to live in and experience and help usher in now for not just myself, but for people around me as well. Yeah.
I mean, if we think about people who are highly dogmatic,
Mm.
then that becomes the destination,
Mm.
right? So I'll sacrifice and do everything for now and suffer because I know, or I believe that, when I die, I'll be in the good place. But I think a lot of us now have a slightly different approach whereby we potentially believe that that's possible in this moment.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's if we're that, maybe what you were saying is that dogmatic approach of, well, that's if I do the right things, then that's where I'll go. It's almost like we make a bargain with the divine, and we say, well, if I tick these boxes, then I get to go to heaven. And again, I see it all the time. People that say, well, I did all these things, and then why didn't God, keep up His end of the bargain? And maybe not talking about heaven afterwards, but I did these things. Why is God not keeping up, doing His thing? And so we have this kind of transactional understanding of our spirituality, where if I, pay this price and sacrifice, and if I'm generous enough and give enough money, or and kind enough to people around you, then maybe that's the idea of and maybe karma does that a little bit as well, like then the divine owes it to me to make sure to give me this and this. And I see it over and over and over again, people who are frustrated and hurt and kind of disillusioned because that bargain hasn't worked out for them. They're like, well, I did all this, and why is this thing still happening to me? So for me, it's not how I see faith working, not from my perspective and my tradition. That's a very transactional faith, which usually doesn't end well. Usually ends in just disappointment. Because really, in that scenario, we think that we're God. If I can do enough things, then I can make this happen. So it puts me in control, right? I'm in control. I'm in control. I tick all the boxes. I am good. This to this many people.
Yeah.
I have control over my destiny, and then we realize that we don't.
Yeah.
And life just happens.
Right.
And then we go, but hold on, I did these things, because we think we're in control, but we're not.
Oh, good point.
Yeah.
Hey guys, thank you so much for tuning in to Signs of the Soul. This is a short interruption to let you know that if you or someone you know are in need of more support, you can find me at Road to Recovery on my Facebook page, my Instagram, or my website at aroadtorecovery.org. I hope you've enjoyed listening so far, and now let's get back to the podcast.
And just a quick nod to what you said earlier before you started explaining yourself, that the ideas that you're sharing, they're not yours. And I think this is the evolution of consciousness and human evolution as well. Like, we stand on the shoulders of giants.
No such thing as original ideas, is there?
Yeah. And I have to say, I hope before I die, I get enough ideas into me, and hopefully be able to spread that outward more. Because I don't think I've had an original idea since the PhD.
Well, we're all, you probably deserve a break from that, yeah.
That's true.
It wasn't that long ago. Yeah. But we're all incarnating those ideas and living them out, because it's not like everyone's, if you're a young baby, you're not born with all those ideas downloaded. So there's an ongoing responsibility for people to live out what they have learnt and understood, and to pass that on. And that's it. If we, sometimes we might feel like, well, it's not making any difference, but if we were to stop, then really things would go backwards, right?
Yeah, and that's the hallmark of a practice, isn't it?
Yeah. So we have a responsibility to our families and our communities to continue to just share those ideas, no matter how old or cliche we think they are. Because usually they're cliche because they're true.
This is also very true.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so you talked about wholeness,
Mm.
and I wonder how, apart from feeling centered and satisfied and potentially not in any form of suffering with any illusions or grasping, potentially.
Mm-hmm.
What does that look like in mental health?
What does wholeness look like in mental health? Well, first of all, I'd come back and say I don't think it's got anything to do with the absence of suffering.
Okay.
I think wholeness is something that happens to us despite our suffering.
Okay.
The idea of peace or shalom, and for me, I'd connect into that. The idea of joy is a concept that happens despite our circumstances. So if my wholeness is dependent on my circumstances being perfect, I'm never going to be whole because my circumstances are never perfect. And if my wholeness is dependent on me having worked through all my issues and dealt with all my childhood trauma and all that kind of whatever the things are, I'm never going to get there because that's always a part of who I am. That's always a part of my story. It's a part of my narrative. It's a part of my self-concept. So wholeness happens, peace happens despite my circumstances, despite my story, despite my history. So it is like, we use the phrase, we come to peace with it.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
So this happened to me, but I have come to peace with it, which is a fascinating phrase, which is a way of saying I've accepted it. But this, like, I have come to peace. This thing happened, but I have come to peace. So think about that phrase. That's a powerful. Maybe I've come from trauma, but I have come to peace.
It kind of feels like a journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it is. Absolutely. If you're a person that has to come to peace with something, you've definitely gone on a journey. Yeah.
But I wonder how you can. I don't even want to say achieve. How you can experience wholeness.
Experience wholeness.
If you are in acute distress. Or are you talking about outside acute distress?
I don't know. This is where I feel like, this is where I got to say I'm not a psychologist, so I don't know, and I don't feel qualified to speak into that. I think if you're in acute distress, you're in acute distress, and that's where you are, and there is a journey for you. Does it mean that wholeness is unattainable? No. Can you be whole while also being in acute distress?
Yeah, I think that's my question.
I would say, and I'm speaking not from a psychology point of view, but from a theological point of view, I would say yes.
Okay.
Because my wholeness is not dependent on me. It is a gift from beyond me, it's a gift from above. Wholeness is a gift I receive, not something I have to achieve.
Right.
So, and I don't say that to diminish anyone's experience of whatever they are, in the middle of. But if my wholeness is dependent on me, I feel like I'm screwed. Because I know that in me I am never whole. I can never have a, the Johari's window, right? Like, there's always parts of me that I'm not even aware of. So even if I try to journey on my own towards wholeness, unconsciously I'm self-sabotaging myself because I'm not whole.
Right.
So how can I take myself to wholeness if I'm not whole? Because there's parts of me I'm unaware of that are always going to drag me off to the left or off to the right. And so my understanding is that wholeness is something that is gifted to me from outside of me, from beyond, from the divine, right? That is, it's a gift of God.
Okay.
And my place is to accept it, which sounds strange. And again, that's that now and not yet, right? Comes back into play. I don't feel like I have it, but I know that it's a gift that I can receive. And so I have it. It's a gift I've been given to me, but I don't feel like I have grasped it yet.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when you're given a gift so precious, actually don't know how to pick it up properly.
Wow, okay. I love your analogies. They're very visual and helpful for me, for my understanding at least. So I'm thinking about it from a psychological standpoint, and I guess wholeness, from what you've explained, can be interpreted as a positive resource that we can draw from if we choose to acknowledge it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. That wholeness is not unattainable for anyone, because it's a gift that is there for us to accept, and accepting that isn't like a, like I picture in my mind picking up a thing and go, oh, now I have it. Look, there it is. To accept wholeness is a journey, right? It's a coming to understand myself differently, which always takes time, lots of time, and comes with doubt and questions. And what's that song? 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Anyway, it's never a linear process. There's good days and there's bad days. We all experience that.
Yeah.
Some days we feel more whole than others. It doesn't mean that on the days we don't feel more whole that we are less whole. No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Just because I feel it doesn't make it true.
Right.
Yeah.
So our subjective experience of it may not hold that much value.
Yeah.
Because our subjective experiences change all the time.
Yeah. And that's a great gift of faith, right? The great gift of faith is that I have a firm trust in a God who has revealed himself to us in a lot of different ways. And I have a holy text that speaks, that speaks the truth of God. And it tells me things that are a firm foundation for me for the days I wake up and do not feel that at all. So, and every faith has that.
Yeah.
It has truth that is beyond me. And that's the beautiful gift it gives us, is that the days where I wake up and doubt everything, I have something that tells me what's true beyond what I feel and beyond what my lived experience is. So God says, you are mine, you are loved, you are whole, even when I feel broken and I feel rejected and I feel unloved. I have something beyond my experience that says, yeah, but you are loved, you are whole. Yeah.
And by accepting and acknowledging that there is wholeness within you, regardless of how you feel about it day to day, that gives us kind of like a lifeline. I mean, I'm thinking about the divine's role, parental role towards us, whereby we will never truly, if we accept that, we will never truly feel at a loss, hopeless, or, well, I mean, theoretically.
I don't know if we'll ever feel hopeless. I think we still live in our human experience. We'll still live in our human experience, but there's always something beyond. There's an understanding that there's something beyond my human experience. That's why I think it takes more faith to not believe that there's something beyond, because for me there's a sense of when all my human resources run out, whether that's my time, my energy, my money, just my mental capacity, or my capacity to do positive things for my mental health, there's also always a resource outside of me that is there to catch me, to remind me. There's a community of people around me that will remind me. There's texts and scriptures that will remind me when I've forgotten everything.
Which is one of the things that keeps coming up when I meditate, is to read.
Mm.
To always read, because you will forget.
Mm.
The human race
Yeah.
is just amnesic. We
Yeah.
forget everything in history, in our lives, in our day, in our week, our lessons. Like, we just have to keep reading in order to remind ourselves.
Yeah. When we read scripture as a family together, my daughter goes, "Oh, Dad, I already know this. I've read this before." And I'm like, "Well, yeah, I know." And I have too, 100 times. But I come back to it because it's more than just a story that we hear once and go, "Oh, that's nice." It holds truth about how the world works and how I work. And that truth applies to me differently every time I go back to it.
Like the diamond analogy
you were
talking about.
Every time we turn it a little bit, I see something new. And I come to it as a different person every time as well.
True.
Every time I come back to it, to a text, I'm a different person. I've lived more days or more years. I've experienced different things. I've experienced different joys, different hurts. So I come back to that, and it has something new for me. Because we believe, in my text it says, the word of God is alive and active. It says sharper than a double-edged sword, to pierce joint and marrow. This idea that it cuts through to the truth of things, cuts through to the heart of things. That it's alive and active. It's not just a thing to be studied and understood. There's a alive, dynamic, divine nature.
Nice.
It has its own nature to it.
It's not static.
Yeah.
In any form. Yeah. That's interesting, right? I think about science that way as well. Because whatever that we learn, whatever we experience theoretically, we see, it happens around us. Once you have the knowledge, then you see it, though.
Yeah.
If you don't have the knowledge behind it, the theory behind it, you don't see it, because ignorance is bliss. You don't know what you don't know, right?
It's I love that you bring that up. One of the fascinating things is this conflict that seems to exist between science and faith, where I think they're actually both part of the same conversation, which is how do we understand our world better? How do we understand our human experience better? And like you're saying, science helps me actually see the world differently. Once I learn something and discover something, can understand it better, then I can see the world differently. And I'm like, well, you're just seeing, what the divine has created in a new light with new understanding, and that's, for me, that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
I don't know why people of faith are supposedly afraid of that. Just like when I encounter the divine, and that helps me see myself differently and the world differently and other people differently. It's all just that sense of that pursuit of enlightenment or wholeness, or heaven.
Thank you for that. And you talked a lot about, I guess we've talked a lot about the self and understanding from the self. How do we bring that down to understanding ourselves, whereby we can actually action it and improve our mental health and well-being?
How do we do that? For me, it comes back to understanding. My faith gives me a different understanding of what's true about me.
Okay.
What's true about my circumstances, what's true about my potential. And kind of coming back to some of the conversations we've had before, I think the beautiful thing about faith, it gives me a different starting point. So, often in life, we kind of feel like we're this blank book and we need to fill it in, right? We got to do things, achieve things, prove ourselves to be useful, prove ourselves to have worth. Do I have worth in this world? Am I a good enough person that people accept me and love me, that I have friends, that I belong somewhere? Do I have enough natural skills and talent to be acceptable enough to be employed somewhere? These are things we chase after, and that all the people around us chase after. Well, a perspective of faith actually comes from the opposite, and it says you don't need to prove anything. So, we, instead of saying, well, I need to find out what my purpose is, because then I know that I have worth and that I have value, right? We actually say, well, no, inherently, because I am created, I already have value. I'm already loved. Before I do a thing, I am loved. Before I achieve anything, I am created with purpose. There's a divine intention to my existence. And so I don't have to prove that. I already have that. It's a gift I live with already. And so now I can just figure out how to best live that out.
To realize.
Yeah. And again, that's a sense of security there. And so it comes back to, instead of saying, am I loved and accepted? I already know that I have worth. I am loved. I am accepted. Therefore, I can enter into situations, into relationships, not needing the love of that other person to, convince me that I'm good enough to exist.
Right, yeah.
I already know that I am.
Yeah.
I already have that love. Now I can enter into that relationship securely. Does that make sense? So having that foundation of knowing I'm loved, knowing I have purpose, knowing I'm created with intent, that there's a the uniqueness to me that's never existed in this world ever before, means that and this is the mental health thing, I suppose, my self-concept is different. Instead of my self-concept always being questioned and reliant on what I achieve, how I belong, all that kind of stuff, my self-concept is already, not that it's ever just inbuilt, right? But I have this whole faith tradition of thousands of years of a self-concept that says, you are loved. Not because of anything you do or because of how people treat you, you just are loved because you exist, because God created you and God loves what he created. You have purpose because you are part of something bigger than yourself. You're not just here to kind of figure out the best way to earn a lot of money and that'll bring you happiness or something. You're created as part of a ongoing divine creation and regeneration of the world, and you have a part to play. So there's already assumptions I can make about myself that I can just stand on when the rest of the world causes me to question those things. So I think as far as mental health, it's a resource that I think has a firmer foundation for us.
Yeah, it's very intrinsic compared to the other alternative, whereby you're constantly striving, grasping, needing, wanting the validation of the world, essentially, to inform your self-value and self-worth. Whereas on the other hand, you said secure, I just keep thinking of a secure attachment.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when you have a secure attachment with an agapic figure like God, or a divine entity, or whatever it is that you want to call it, then you always feel like you're part of something greater.
Yeah. I'm got a big grin on my face at the moment because I'm picturing in the place where I go to church, there's this one. He's maybe 2-year-old, and both his parents are psychologists, so he just has a very healthy attachment, right? And what that means is that he just runs off. He just runs all over the place. He's always running up and down the aisles. But there's a sense where there's other children I know that don't have that secure attachment, and so they're always clingy, right? And so that secure attachment gives us freedom.
Yeah, 100%.
Gives
you
us
can independently explore.
I can run, I can explore, I can taste, I can, as a 2-year-old, I can put my fingers in things, I can lick the handrails because that's what they do, right?
What?
Your 2-year-olds, they're interested in what goes into their mouth.
Yeah.
But there's a sense of freedom to explore and to just kind of take in the breadth of what life has, because there's a security there. There's an understanding that I'm safe. I'm loved. Everything will be okay. And even when I fall over and bump my head and life beats me up, I'm still safe. I know I'm loved. I know that even though it hurts now, things will be okay.
I wonder if you've come across any research or any articles or writings around people of faith being inherently more optimistic.
Not specifically around optimism. I mean, there's plenty of research that talks about just the improve mental health of people of faith. And that's pretty kind of standard understanding, is that people of faith, have better mental health outcomes. And that's probably part in due to the dynamics of the faith that we've just been talking about, and also the fact that they usually, if you're a person of faith, you belong to a community, a social community as well. So there's less isolation, there's more supports, that kind of thing as well. But probably I can't recall anything specifically around that. No.
Because just from what you were describing, like no matter what happens, I'll be okay. That sense of security leans towards optimism as well. Which is why I was wondering if you knew of any studies, but
that'd be fascinating.
Yeah,
I would like to think that yes, simply because again, there's an eternal viewpoint, isn't there?
Yeah, and there's hope. When you have an eternal viewpoint, there's hope.
Yeah.
And when you have intrinsic belief of love from day dot, basically, then why? It's hard to lean towards pessimism. But I'm just speaking rationally, not from experience, right? So everyone's lived experience is different. Everyone has a different mental health composition, neurochemically and whatnot.
And I don't want to seem like, well, if you've got faith then you won't have mental health battles. That's being ingenuine and not true at all. We do, and that's complex and hard, and the flip side of what we're talking about, maybe I'm opening up a whole other thing here, is there's dangers in that, and saying, well, if you have faith then you shouldn't struggle with mental health, and then there's shame that can come there, which is which is really, really harmful and really unhelpful. One of the things I enjoy in my job is creating a space where people are maybe free from their faith communities to actually have that conversation and go, I actually feel judged, or I feel shamed because I have this mental health struggle. And people just tell me, well, just pray, pray your mental health struggles away, or just maybe you just don't believe enough. Like there's those implications which I think are really, really unhelpful and not true. Like I think that's really harmful narrative to have. So if there's anyone listening and maybe for the last half an hour, 45 minutes they've been kind of frustrated and maybe yelling at us, like I want to say that really, really clearly. There's not a sense of, well, if you just believe enough, or if you just pray hard enough, or if you're a better, insert your faith here, then you won't have these mental health struggles. I don't think that's not true. That's not helpful. Again, that takes us back to that transactional understanding of faith. If you just do these things, then God will give you these things. Faith is not a transactional thing. It's a resource. It's a well we draw from. And sometimes we're really good at drawing from that well, and sometimes we're not. And sometimes it feels like that well is full and overflowing, and sometimes the well feels dry. And we put our bucket down and we get nothing, and we're like, well, what am I doing this for?
Which reminds me about what you talked about initially on wholeness, and how suffering is part of it. So I guess, in Islam, they say that half of your faith is in patience, sabr. And in other scriptures as well, there's so much emphasis on patience, of just waiting for what needs to happen, and some wisdom will arise if you conduct yourself appropriately. And that nothing is permanent, everything passes as well, the good, the bad, the ugly.
Yeah, and that diamond, coming back to the diamond again, diamonds are made under pressure, aren't they? You can't get diamonds if there's not great pressure. So they don't just happen in sandy beaches, pretty sandy beaches. They happen deep underground, in dark places where there's a lot of pressure. But beautiful things do come and can come.
Well, thank you so much, Tom. I like our little full circle.
Yeah, I know. We didn't even plan that. It was great.
This whole thing is completely unscripted. True story.
True story.
Thank you so much for your time. It's so nice to see you again.
Yeah, it's been great.
I'll come around soon and we'll have another conversation.
Wonderful. Look forward to it.
Alrighty.
All right.
Bye.